Welcome, Low Ego Action Heroes. This is episode 109, and it is a conference presentation that I've rewritten for 2021. It's called Improving Agility by Using Customers' Definitions of Quality and Done. The target audience for this is not the CX and UX crowd. It's really all of our other teammates, coworkers, collaborators, managers, leaders, and executives. So I'm doing it here today so that we can get it into the YouTube library. And if you like it, I hope it's something that you'll share with some of the people at your workplace. I've heard some of you are doing Delta CX watch parties, and this one would be perfect, especially for the non-UX people in the group. So that means I'm going to waste no time, and I'm going to jump right in and do this. I'll be watching the chat room and answering questions as we go. This talk runs about an hour, so just know that it might run a little bit late today, but not too late because I have something to do after this. So here we go. I will be down in this tiny box. And let's jump right in. And hopefully that is working. Let me know if you don't see my slide and a giant me. No, you see my notes and not a giant me. No, what do you see? People in the chat room, what do you see? You should see my slide, a giant slide that says Improving Agility by Using Customers' Definitions. You should not see my notes. Can someone in the chat room tell me what we see before I go on? Sorry, everybody, you'll have to fast forward past this part. Someone? No one's live? Anyone? I see your slide. Okay, so you don't see my notes. You don't see a black screen that says Delta CX is my full service CX and UX agency. That's a note I have to remind myself to say that. So just checking nobody sees my notes. We see the slide. All right, I'm going to go for it. Nope, no notes. Okay, so I don't know what's going on here. All right, sorry about that, Delta CX watch party people from the future. Here we go. Hello, I'm Debbie from Delta CX, and I've been working in CX and UX since 1995. I'm a strategist, architect, trainer, and speaker. Delta CX is my full-service CX and UX agency. We do a lot of projects, consulting, training, and helping companies out with anywhere they're having problems with their customer centricity. Clients call me Mary Poppins because I fly in, fix everything I can, sing a few songs, and fly into where I'm needed next. So let me also remind you that you can follow me on LinkedIn, and you can please subscribe to my YouTube channel, Delta CX. You'll also notice as I'm going through that there are little camera icons popping up. That just means this is a great time to take a screenshot of the screen, or if we were live in an arena somewhere, take a picture of it, because it means my slide is done animating. Also, you'll notice that I'm saying CX where you might expect to hear UX. They're very close, but CX has risen up recently as a more broader and more appropriate term for what we do, but I'll explain that a little bit more later. I hope everybody saw the slides changing, right? You see slides changing and not notes? Okay, just checking. Thank you, John. So Agile has definitions of done and quality that are supposed to be about making sure the product is done right and is high quality. In our Agile world, how do we define quality? Velocity, productivity, and efficiency, improved software performance, few or no bugs, meet stakeholder requirements. What about our definition of done? We did what we planned. It fit business objectives. It's coded, tested, documented, and deployable. There's something huge missing here. Does our product match our users' and customers' definitions of quality or done? Does it fit their tasks and needs? Did the system optimize or complicate a workflow? How do you decide when an experience you're having at a restaurant is a high or low quality experience? It might be the look or design of the restaurant, how the staff treat you, how the place smells, how clean it seems to be, the presentation of the food, the price of the food, the flavor of the food, how you feel a few hours after eating the food, and more. You have multiple criteria for quality in nearly everything you do in your life. Our users and customers have lots of criteria they use to judge our products and services. So why do we use minimally viable definitions of quality and done? Code with few or no bugs can be called quality code, but food without bugs can still be low quality food. Poor quality ingredients, bad recipe, bad chef, or any combination of these can kill our restaurant experience, even if we didn't find any bugs. Let's take a poll. All right, I do have a poll set up. Now, of course, if you're watching this later, you may or may not be able to get involved in this, but hey, why not? So this would be visit menti.com, and you're going to have to do menti.com/, if you're watching this later, lowercase V55QXYVMD. If you're here live with us, go to menti.com and put in 899370990, but that changes, that number changes. The graph on the screen estimates the risks and costs of a product or concept having to pivot. Drop a point on this graph for where you wish your teams could learn that our customers will see a feature or product as low quality. Not where you learn this now, where you wish you were learning that our solution is going in the wrong direction. And I'll give people a few minutes to join the poll and answer it, though I don't see too many people joining live today, but hopefully we'll get some poll responses. So again, if you're joining in the future and you want to play along, go to menti.com, MENTI, /lowercase V557QXYVMD. Because that number changes. Don't ask me. I like menti.com, but holy cats, that could be better. Oh, let me go back to this. So we've got one person saying we should learn our product is going in the wrong direction, somewhere between early concepts and testing. Okay? And again, it's not that there's a wrong answer here. I just find that there's a big difference that I'm going to explain later in the presentation. I'll give everybody a few more seconds to fill this out, just in case there's somebody other than our one lone live poll person. Again, that's the downside of doing a live event. It's like, how many people are here to fill this out? One. So I'll give everybody a few more seconds, especially if you're trying this at home. And I'm also going to try to fix how I am superimposed over this. That's too high. There we go. That's better. Yeah. Two people voted. I accept. So really quickly, the last time I did this talk for a real audience, it looked like this. This is what people were saying. This was a group of Agile coaches and Scrum Masters. And this was where they wanted to learn that the product is possibly going in the wrong direction. And I think all of these except one are excellent answers. One of the answers is a little weird. Maybe you can spot it. All right, so let me flip back to my slides and we'll continue. Slides with me floating. I'm floating. Okay, so when we are disconnected from how our users and customers define quality and done, we are going down the wrong path. We claim that we're focused on customer satisfaction, supporting and empowering our teammates, allowing time in our processes for good or great design, and being lean by cutting waste and reducing work we shouldn't do. But I've pretty much never seen this happening anywhere I've worked or where my friends have worked. Are these really happening on your team? Are we really using retros to identify problems and waste, and then truly fixing those problems and cutting that waste? Instead, we fill our world with catchy sayings that we use as excuses to not be agile or lean. Just ship it, often without knowing if it's the right solution for our customers. We'll fix it later. How often do we really fix it later? When is later? What will we have to delay and what will it cost? Users will have to figure it out, or they will flood you with support tickets, or they will cancel, leave, and give up. Fail fast. There's nothing cool about failing fast or slowly when real paying or trial customers suffer with your failure. If you're not embarrassed, you shipped too late. Does this mean that our goal is to be embarrassed by our product? Most of us would prefer to feel proud that our product is a great match to customers' needs and tasks. Lean is the least we can do to get us to the next step. Lean disagrees. This is a bastardization of lean that seemed to come from the Lean Startup book. Anybody who has studied Toyota's original approach to lean or Lean Six Sigma knows that lean isn't the least we can get away with doing. It's about identifying and cutting waste. Fake lean is wasteful and takes us down wrong paths, which means we should cut fake lean for not being lean. Move fast and break things. Sure, only if you fix those things before the public struggles with them. It's good enough for the engineering team, for stakeholders, or for our paying or trial customers. We've been experimenting with speed over quality methods for years now, and it should be pretty clear from our project costs, ROI, customer support tickets, tweets about us, our stock price, and other hints that this doesn't work. We must stop praying to the false gods of speed and give your customers broken things. We must stop using any of these as excuses for low effort or failures. When I speak at engineering, agile, and lean conferences, I ask the audience full of engineers to raise their hands if they've ever known while building something that it wasn't right for target users. Every hand goes up. They know they're building something of poor quality that might have to be fixed or undone later, but nobody is empowered to say anything. Like assembly line robots, they are being judged by how much they got done. Creating a higher quality product means spending more time and money up front. Instead, someone declares, "We'll fix it later." We hide that later fix in another budget and call the original project that caused the problems a success. And isn't it amazing that we never have time to create a better product now, but we'll have time later to stop a future project to fix this old one? It's scary to think about stopping the Agile train because somebody realized late in the game that we're building something that doesn't match the customer's needs. But it should be scarier to imagine burning our time, resources, budget, and customer trust on something that doesn't match the customer's needs. Agile welcomes change, even late in the game, even if we have to change the project requirements, which might mean the product itself. If our systems aren't right for every user that's going to interact with them, can we congratulate ourselves for having an efficient engineering process? If Agile is supposed to be about welcoming change even later in a process, why do we reward silence and avoid holding people accountable for disaster projects? Workers and teams who are afraid to stop a project that's likely to fail signify culture problems that will need improvement. In the old days, when what the customer needed didn't overlap what the business wanted to do or sell people, you built what the business wanted. You hired more marketing and salespeople to figure out how you were going to make people think they want this. Those are the dinosaur days, but they're not extinct just yet. Therefore, instead of our Venn diagram looking like customer needs and business goals are on two different islands, we must bring them together. That's not done by pushing customers into what we think we can sell them or what we can force or trick them into doing. It's done by shifting business goals, strategies, and initiatives to match our customers. It's done by making customer-centricity part of our strategy. It's done by CX and UX. CX and UX Aren't those the people who keep interrupting my work to bring me into hours or days of workshops so we can create empathy? Sadly, they might be, but I'm doing everything I can to burn that time-wasting workshop crap to the ground. When you think about people who work in CX or UX, you probably imagine artsy-fartsy hipsters who sketch screens or make screens pretty. That's not necessarily true. And there's a lot more going on in CX and UX than many people realize. The core and foundations of our work are cognitive psychology and human behavior, not art. Mitigating risk. The main process most CX and UX practitioners use is called user-centered design, sometimes human-centered design, UCD or HCD. It has multiple phases, including research, content strategy, information architecture, interaction design, usability testing, and iteration. Each phase has multiple tasks that can be done. CX professionals must approach this process strategically, deciding which tasks are needed, how long those will take, in what order we'll do them, and what resources are required. Order does matter here because each phase is informed by the phases that came before it. Our research informs everything we do later. Information architecture informs interaction design. You'll also hear a lot about models that say things like learn, build, and test. That's an oversimplification considering all of the steps any of us take to learn, build, and test. But learning, building, and testing, and improving are baked into our process. You're probably already familiar with what we call interaction design. This is our wireframes, prototypes, and other blueprints of how this lays out, how this works, and how people interact with it. But you might not know about all the other phases of our process that make our interaction design work good. If we care about quality, we care about the quality of the process and the outcomes it can create. It's also why when we're asked to just guess at the build phase and make some wireframes, often without researching or testing, it's another high-risk guessing adventure that's likely to lead our company or project down the wrong path. It's the lean sin of underutilized talent when we only budget enough time for CX and UX to guess at screens when there's so much risk mitigating science and technique in our process. Research is the most important CX phase. It's not user-centered without users. We primarily want to observe them since you can learn a lot more about who people are and their tasks, needs, and goals by watching them. Interviews are excellent when we ask the right questions the right ways. But since what people say and what people do aren't always the same, observational studies are best. Statistics and quantitative data are nice, but there's no substitute for observing and interviewing users, deeply understanding them, and getting qualitative data. CX wants to know the what, why, and how, and not just the how many. Every step of research is important. Planning, writing interview and task guides, recruiting participants, executing the research, interpreting it, evaluating what we found, and arriving on actionable insights. Researchers find the root causes and all of their outcomes and consequences. Researchers are problem-finding detectives. Last year, we did a live, remote, 1-hour observational research study, that's 1 hour per person, to learn how online sellers list their items for sale on a certain platform. We asked participants to share their screen and show us how they list an item. We found an incredible amount of information. We found that certain fields on the page were meaningless to people. They didn't know what they meant, so they weren't sure if they had to fill them out or what they should put in there. We learned that they put band-aids and workarounds on their process. They had outside tools, systems, cheat sheets, browser plugins, and more to try to improve their task completion. They found inconsistencies and inefficiencies. Why does the form ask if your downloadable art file PDF comes framed? They found error messages that didn't make sense to them. They couldn't understand what was going wrong or how to fix it. You're unlikely to discover these types of details about behaviors, workarounds, and tasks through a survey. A/B testing doesn't tell us this. And people tend to be less honest in focus groups because others in the room are surely judging them. By watching how people do things now, we can deeply understand their tasks. Usability testing happens during our process and before engineering writes a line of code. We need to make sure that this is the idea and the execution of the idea that'll be fantastic for our target users. We don't want engineering to build it until we're sure this is what should be built. Testing is the QA of CX and UX. We don't skimp on or exclude QA testing for our code, even when our developers are really smart and talented. So why would we rush out untested product concepts? Usability testing will bring to light any flaws, giving CX the chance to iterate on ideas. Iteration and refinement are a mini cycle of their own. Build, test, learn. You can also understand why if you see UX as wireframing some screens, which is one task from one phase of user-centered design, a broader term like CX might help people better understand the whole of what we do. All the customer knows is the customer experience. That's it. They don't see 1,000 developers or whether you were agile or lean. They don't know if you had an agile mindset, a project mindset, a product mindset, or any other mindset or religion. They only know the system or site you expected them to use. What's the last website app or system you used that you really loved? It solved your problems. It helped you get your tasks done efficiently. It's hard to think of one, isn't it? Would your users put your products and services on the list of what they really love? We want that answer to be yes. When you use a system that frustrates you, you're probably not thinking, I wonder how many sprints they spent on that. When something doesn't work the way you expected it to, you're probably thinking, who built this junk? And that's a good question. Who researched with users like you to learn your habits, motivations, needs, tasks, and then architect and design for those? Was this tested on people like you before it was unleashed on the public? There's doing UCD, and there's doing UCD well and correctly. Does the quality of work matter? Of course it does. That's why we hire programmers who are really great at coding. Therefore, we need to talk a little bit about the difference between professionals and experts doing CX work and non-CX work stabbing at our mission-critical tasks. My Faces of Proficiency model reminds us of why you can't give CX work to just anybody. You can't tell engineers to read a CX or UX book or take an online course, bless you, my boyfriend, and then do what CX experts and specialists do. You'll be doing CX work in the building blocks phase, where we're focused on tools, templates, and tasks. But nobody's judging how well you did something. Hand me a hammer or a saw, and I won't use those tools the way a senior carpenter does. I'm not even at junior carpenter level. I'm at the building blocks level. Science and technique are the how, or how well of what we're doing. It moves past the mechanical act of performing a task and looks at the quality, depth, style, and approach to the work done. Science and critical thinking turn a task into a technique. Talking to users is a building block. But did you ask good questions or crappy, flawed questions? Now we're getting into technique. How was your research planned, recruited, executed, evaluated, and interpreted? That's science and technique. Sketching a screen is a building block, but did you create a completely accessible experience? Did your interaction design take correctly executed, qualitative research findings and insights into account? Science and technique is what separates pros and specialists from everybody else. Strategy is why or when you would use your science and technique around the user-centered design process, as well as being able to predict and estimate how long the work will take. When do I do a card sort? When would I do interviews versus observational studies versus a survey? How long will each of these take and what resources do I need? Therefore, When we're considering who does CX or UX work, we must consider their phase of proficiency. We don't want anybody toying with building blocks to do our mission-critical work. Our coworkers, managers, leaders, and execs very rarely see the science and technique or the strategy that go into our work. They see wireframes, pretty screens, sketches, whiteboards, and walls of sticky notes. So they think UX makes screens. Anybody can make wireframes and decide how our products look and work. The phases of proficiency are really an iceberg where people are used to seeing just the tip of the iceberg without understanding what's going on below the surface. The iceberg model explains why Agile and Scrum coaches keep telling me that UX has easy work anybody can do, like paper prototypes. This is so easy, anybody can do it, means we're in building block land, ignoring the quality of the work being done and ignoring the body of the iceberg, the cognitive psychology, interaction design, information architecture, accessibility, and other concepts, best practices, and skills that we need to create excellent paper prototypes or wireframes. I learned some basic programming in 1979. I learned HTML in 1995. I'm passionate about engineering, so I can code to production, right? Or am I just at the building blocks phase of proficiency? If you are squirming in your seat at the idea of your engineers having to work with or check my code, then you know what CX and UX are thinking every time we hear that anybody can do our work, or that engineers and product managers making some wireframes will be good enough for customers. Side note, I never make paper prototypes because they aren't realistic. I don't ask people to react to sketches because they're too far from how users expect a product to look or work. I use Axure to make realistically highly interactive digital prototypes. How can I do decent research or testing if I'm showing people non-interactive paper? If our product isn't paper-based, then a paper prototype probably isn't the right tool or building block for the job. But if we give teammates a little training in CX or UX, can't they do some CX or UX work? Should the product manager make wireframes? Should the business analyst interview users? Or engineers delay coding to do design? I have an easy method to determine if we should give CX or UX work to a product manager, engineer, or other non-CX role. If you had an open full-time CX job at your organization, would your non-CX role qualify for that job? No, they wouldn't qualify to work in CX or UX full-time at your company. Then we don't give them CX or UX tasks or work of any kind. It's one of many reasons why you don't hand me a DevOps book and then have me deploy a Kubernetes cluster. Instead, you hire an experienced DevOps professional, as you should. You wouldn't allow roles outside of DevOps to experiment with DevOps tasks. We shouldn't do this with CX. Trying to retrofit the wrong person into important tasks is bad for process, product quality, and user satisfaction. And efficiency. Teammates stopping what they're doing to guess at my work will get less of their own work done. A qualified CX expert will be more efficient at CX tasks than some other roles stopping their mission-critical work to guess at ours. A cost-benefit analysis should drive that point home. Quickly, I am watching the chat room in case people have questions as I go along, if you're watching live. Also, you can't have it both ways. You can't believe in an Agile that treats humans like assembly line robots, measuring them by efficiency, productivity, and how much they got done in a period of time, and then expect them to get less engineering work done to spend time guessing at CX and UX tasks. Aspirologies. Things to avoid. Because we care about UCD done correctly, we need to talk about trendy approaches that pretend to be CX or UX, but are sometimes quite the opposite. Aspirologies is my made-up word for pseudo-methodologies that aspire to greatness but will only end up as soon-forgotten trends. We're not going to optimize products or improve our agility if we're using the wrong approaches or methods. The main aspirologies you will run into are design sprints, design thinking, and so-called lean UX, which is neither lean nor UX. Aspirologies have some common characteristics you can easily recognize. Codependency. CX seems to need everybody to do their job for and with them. Disrespect of teammates' time. Aspirology workshops or exercises require teammates to stop what they're doing for hours or days. Reliance on assumptions. Aspirologies prioritize speed over quality. They increase business and project risk by running with guesses, thinking that will save time. Giving specialized work to non-specialists. Aspirologies love workshops where CX and UX work is done by those without CX and UX knowledge, expertise, experience, skill, or talent. Yet, where else would we do that? We don't hold workshops where everybody, including me, co-decides the back-end database architecture. Democratizing or decentralizing CX is completely fake. Many non-CX roles demand to have authority over CX and UX. They tell us we must democratize and let everybody make decisions about the user experience. Yet those roles never give up power or decisions in their own domain. We don't have the cross-functional team all making engineering decisions. Magically, the cries for democracy are only for CX. They apply to no other domain, which is how we know this is fake. Innovation and solution theater. How many never-before-seen world premiere ideas came out of these workshops? How many solutions were wrong, non-viable, were based on guesses, versus being based in proper research? Vote for the winner. Somehow, we don't all need to get together, brainstorm various product roadmaps, and then vote on our favorite roadmap. If we're customer-centric, then we don't make any decisions without having researched and tested with real or potential customers. We don't pick products or features American Idol style, even if that sounds fun. Emotional outcomes. Everybody enjoyed the workshop. But where are the real budget and ROI figures? What were our success criteria? Did our workshop even have success criteria? Enough buzzwords so that it'll sound like CX even if it's not CX. You'll hear about customer journey maps, personas, and problem solving. You'll hear about prototypes and testing. But if you remember our phases of proficiency model, this is all just building blocks and theater. You might hear buzzwords that sound like Agile, like here's something we can do in a sprint. But there's a lot more to Agile than did we do something within a 1-week time box. Design sprints were originally invented to help startups without CX workers quickly do micro pseudo CX and UX work themselves and decide what they would build for their MVP. But CX tests concepts without coding them and releasing them to the public. Product creates and prioritizes the product roadmap. And why are we trying to model ourselves after startups, a segment of businesses with a 90% failure rate on a good day? The original version 1 of design sprints was a 5-day process for a cross-functional team, possibly plus subject matter experts. In short, day 1 defines the problem, day 2 sketches solutions, day 3 picks a winner, day 4 prototypes the winner, and day 5 tests it. This looks like the microscopic cousin of user-centered design, but it's missing too many important tasks at the science and technique phase of proficiency to be a CX or UX process. Version 2 of design sprints is another style that you can use. Someone noticed that we really shouldn't have our cross-functional teams doing prototyping, testing, or interpreting testing. CX experts do the prototyping and testing, and they'll give everybody a report of how it turned out. Design Sprints version 3 is also out there as an option. Some facilitators were arriving at design sprint weeks only to find that what the stakeholder presented as the problem or challenge was immediately recognized as garbage. Version 3 requires that for a few weeks before the sprint starts, experts must do all of the work around the problem. Personas, customer journey maps, and other customer research-based deliverables will not be made by the design sprint workshop attendees. They'll be made ahead of time, hopefully by CX research experts and not someone using guessing and assumptions. Design sprints have devolved from, hooray, everybody come guess at CX and UX stuff, to, oh crap, we should probably let experts do nearly all of this. I'd go further and say that experts should do all of this. One of the many pitfalls of design thinking is that design thinking is not considered a CX or UX process. Nobody has ever stopped my user-centered design tasks and asked me to instead do design thinking. Another pitfall of design thinking is that it's hard to find two people with the same definition of it. And we covered that in episode 108. Check the live stream podcasts playlist for 108. Like religion, each person is sure they have the real definition of design thinking and others are doing it wrong. I've heard it's a process, mindset, paradigm, framework, pedagogy, and an approach to innovation. We can't even agree on what it is or isn't. This graphic is a summary of the 5 days of a design sprint. Define the problem, ideate, decide, prototype, and test. And this is the 5 steps of design thinking. Empathize, define the problem, ideate, prototype, and test. Wow, that's nearly the same! Decades ago, design thinking meant the entire user-centered design process done by experts. Now, design thinking is a chameleon that keeps changing what it means to try to ride trends. Design thinking has been brought into organizations thinking that it will evangelize UX and show the need for good CX, but it has typically done the opposite. Design thinking evangelizes itself while framing great CX and UX work done with science and technique as slow or outdated. Shortcuts aren't the way. We need to focus on user-centered research, architecture, and dedication to all of our users' tasks and needs. Why are we following the lean startup when we work at a large established company that in no way resembles a startup? Part of the original MVP concept was to prove to potential investors that you don't make vaporware. The Lean Startup book incorrectly defined lean to mean moving as fast as possible. That's fine for two guys in a co-working space who don't care if they correctly define lean. They don't care if talking to customers asks the wrong people the wrong questions. They are a lean startup and they are cool. But we live in another universe. We must go beyond the low standards of working software, and we ask users what they want. Another quick side note about fake lean. The Lean UX book was widely hated in my industry when it came out, and it's still widely hated. People understood that the model wasn't lean and wasn't UX, so we ignored it. We were really surprised to see Safe Agile and Scrum.org incorporating Lean UX, considering it's a completely non-viable model that should not be forced on us through engineering. I have hours of this on the Delta CX YouTube channel, but for now, I'll move on. These Aspirologies have been trendy long enough to now have years of data. Calculate what these workshops truly cost and what ROI they create. People love to socialize that Aspirologies work, but without success criteria or KPIs, how do we know they worked? And if they're working so well, why aren't we using Aspirology methods in any other domain? We don't drag people in for a 3-day workshop where everybody makes their own prioritized product roadmap. We don't hold a week-long sticky note festival to brainstorm QA testing. We trust specialists in these areas to do their own work and make their own decisions. Why aren't we doing that with CX? Someone knows how much time and money we're burning on trendy Aspirologies. Someone knows how many industry-disrupting innovations we've someone knows how many industry-disrupting innovations designed by committee workshops created at your company. But more often, someone would rather declare these a success, keep doing them, and hope that nobody notices the wasted time and money. The true costs of these efforts and their ROI are often hidden from execs and leaders. There's a small chance that Aspirologies at your company appear to be working because their empathy theater and fake approaches to CX were better than when your company really didn't care about customers. It's time for you to move past Aspirologies. If design thinking, design sprints, lean UX, and other design by committee models have been a stepping stone, keep stepping. Shift towards customer centricity by hiring qualified CX practitioners and giving them the time and budget to do their best work. Sorry, I was watching the chat room. Kayleen says, I read about someone from a different department or field who, and I can't remember the exact wording, felt threatened that CX could decide everything about the business. Of course, we don't decide everything about the business, but we should be collaborators. We don't decide it any more than product decides everything about the business, or engineering or marketing. This is all about the collaboration at the higher level of planning. But once we're getting to the actual product or service, the bulk, the main, at least the research, architecture, designing, testing, that should be owned by us. That's our specialty. Improving agility. How do we bring customer centricity into Agile and improve our agility? In various flavors of Agile, CX and UX are often a square peg. Someone is either trying to hammer into a round hole, or it's being taken off the board and thrown away for not fitting in. Siloed, excluded. We work differently than engineering. We've got different processes and goals and tasks. Instead of working to understand that and improve processes and collaboration, flavors of Agile often try to control CX. This is going to cause conflict, completely avoidable conflict. It wouldn't make sense for any one domain to demand that all other domains plan, think, prioritize, or work like they do. If you didn't really know about the user-centered design process, its phases and tasks, then there's a 100% chance that you will incorrectly estimate the time I need to do my work. Of course, that was incorrectly. Yet everywhere I've worked, other people guess at the time I need and surprise me at the kickoff meeting. You just draw screens, so we were generous. Your final wireframes are due in 2 days from today. I've heard that more than once. These incorrect estimations lead to interpersonal conflicts, projects appearing to be derailed or stalled by CX, and rushing to push out a design that might still be quite flawed, having not received enough iterations or testing. Product, project, portfolio, and program managers should bring CX into earliest discussions so projects have the right budgets and timelines from the start. Agile teams should include the CX teammate in planning and estimations. Estimating our time is part of our strategic approach to a project. And let us measure time how we measure time. Engineering might plan time in sprints, fractals, or t-shirts. We normally measure in days, maybe hours. As long as CX can populate the backlog with vetted quality work and keep engineering busy, does anybody really care if you estimated your work in points and we estimated in days? There will be a collaborative plan to feed engineering the smallest pieces of work we can on a recurring cadence. Danashree says it's so difficult to convince companies even today as to why CX is important. All they care about is deadlines and delivery. I'm always hoping this talk will help, so share it with the people at your company. So what is the smallest unit of work that UX or CX can pass to engineering? There was a viral video a few years ago showing an automatic soap dispenser installed above a power outlet. Your hand and possibly your power plug will be covered in wet soap, just as you're connecting to live electricity. The caption I saw was, "This is the reason we do integration testing as well as unit testing." That is a good engineering joke. But this is why CX architects and tests complete workflows rather than separate pieces in isolation. Imagine if someone had tested a prototype of a soap dispenser over a power outlet. The problem would have been noticed before anything got installed. Lots of work and human pain saved. CX needs the big picture of the full user experience for whatever task users are trying to achieve. We can't just design small pieces of the task separately and never test them together. We think in terms of the user's task, process, or workflow. We must build for the full arc of that task and test and improve it before we send it to engineering to be built. It's our version of acceptance testing. If the project is something smaller than a full customer workflow, of course we can be nimble and we'd need less time. Not everything CX does requires a giant runway, but project, product, and engineering must be prepared for when a feature calls for that. This common template for sprint goals says, our focus is on achievement or outcome. We believe it delivers benefit or impact to customer. This will be confirmed when event happens. Supposedly, if you fill this out, you'll be really focused on users and outcomes, but that's not a guarantee, mostly because of one risky word here. Did you spot it? Believe. Imagine work goals being based on something someone believes, a guess or assumption. Shouldn't we know it delivers certain benefits because the concept has been validated and vetted before we're planning engineering sprints around it? Believing, assuming, and being reactive aren't agile or lean. Six Sigma is ashamed of you. Architecting for customers' needs and tasks and being agile shouldn't be the polar opposites they often are now. No matter what an agile coach, scrum master, or stakeholder declares, the customer decides what is quality, done, and good enough. If you don't use their definitions, you're going to have to deal later with failures. Every time Agile says that we want feedback from customers or we want to know if users find value in the features, Agile is talking about CX research work. Our researchers generate knowledge and data about people and systems. They run studies to evaluate concepts. Every time we notice that we are guessing, assuming, hypothesizing, making things up, or working based on what someone believes, we should let CX researchers study whatever it is so we can know. Traditional flavors of Agile are correct in saying that we must collect feedback from customers to know if our product has value and is considered high quality by users. But Agile and the MVP model imagine that we have to collect that feedback after releasing the product, when our risks and costs are highest. Since Agile tends to exclude CX and UX processes and professionals, Agile doesn't realize that we can get that feedback through early concept testing of CX prototypes. Teams claiming to be Agile burn time and money to learn very late in the game that we've gone in the wrong direction. Learning this late that we need to fix or rework our product is really waterfall in disguise. Agile can pride itself on doing smaller batches of work and releasing products more frequently. But if you're continuously releasing garbage and not finding flaws until weeks or months later, your boat has just gone over the waterfall. The very earliest moments of project planning must already be focused on customers' needs. CX teammates should be part of project planning before we approve features that have low or no customer value. We used to do this. It was called R&D, research and development. Someone decided that R&D wasn't as cool as pretending we were a startup and rushing out guesses. Focusing on faster has lowered product quality and customer satisfaction. Think of CX as your lower cost and faster R&D team. If you have an R&D team, we'd love to partner with them. We must get back to believing in R&D and R before D. I can show you this graphic on how CX needs to be 2 or more sprints ahead of engineering. I wrote a whole book on this. I can tell you about how CX needs to start before engineering because if we're populating the backlog with finalized designs, we have to start ahead of you. I can call what we do working in sprints. I can call it days. I can show you a variety of models of how CX and UX work with Agile, but I can make this really easy for you because all 7 models on this screen say the same thing. CX is on its own track. We're not working on the same stories engineering is working on in the same sprint. We are weeks ahead, if not more. Once you can accept that Agile is about a predictable and reliable assembly line, we can all exhale, put CX on its own track, cut the conflict and control, and get back to work. Instead of thinking of it as working with UX or adding some CX tasks to our process, think of it as customer centricity. What if you put users and everybody who will touch this product at the center of everything you did? Not what we think they need, not what we hope they need. We put these people at the center of everything we do. We research them. We architect and design for them. We test prototypes on them. And when it's right, now engineering can code it, hopefully once. Transforming towards customer centricity creates a lot of good new habits, processes, and collaborations. Imagine a future where requirements are more focused on real users' needs, tasks, and situations than they tend to be now. Imagine getting it right or much closer the first time so we can know the right direction for our products. This would save so much time later over having problems, finding root causes, and having to rework. CX takes time and money up front, but it should save exponentially more when we eliminate the waste of guessing and releasing products that don't match our customers' needs. Here's how to make Agile truly customer-centric. 1. Build a world-class CX team of well-qualified practitioners. This is harder than it sounds because, since most companies don't understand CX or UX, they just hire the person with a portfolio of pretty screens. They have no idea they were supposed to look for skills or abilities outside of art. That means I'd like to please direct you to my new and completely free training program for HR, recruiters, and hiring managers. Put that up on the screen. It's on my Delta CX Academy website, deltacx.link/HR-training, or go to deltacx.academy. 2. Understand that CX main role is customer research, advocacy, and shepherding customer value. If there's a battle between something the customer needs and something a stakeholder wants, we are more likely to side with the customer. We care about the business, but we often feel like we're the only people truly caring about the customers. When everybody is customer-centric, CX and UX won't look like lone weirdos we accuse of not speaking the business's languages. We need more people to speak the customer's language. 3. CX is part of our strategic approach to product. If we started with research and solid knowledge on all of the people who will use or interact with this product in any way, we can write better requirements and user stories. CX are collaborators to help shepherd customer value in requirements and stories. CX estimates required time early in project planning, way before kickoff. And we get that time because people who care about Agile, Lean, and customer satisfaction recognize that getting our product right earlier pays off in time, money, morale, and more. Step 4. Shift away from broken models and processes. The MVP is broken, but flavors of Agile don't seem to know what to do. Scrum.org has an article saying that minimum viable product would be improved by calling it minimal inspectable increment. That's not customer-centric. Minimal inspectable increment shows that old ways need complete reinvention, not slight renaming. Customers don't want something minimally viable. Stop holding Aspirology workshops glorifying guessing and stop building MVPs. Step 5, it doesn't ship if our target customers wouldn't see it as 5-star quality, or as we say here on the Delta CX YouTube channel, 5 dogs out of 5. There you go. Cut lean waste early. Scrap bad concepts before they're built. Product does not ship if it's not completely intuitive and usable by all customers. It doesn't ship if people with visual, mobility, hearing, or cognitive issues or other disability needs can't easily use it. Number 6, don't force CX to work the way engineering wants engineering to work. There are ways to bring different domains together on a cross-functional team that don't require every domain to operate the way one domain has chosen to run their own ship. Step 7, one CX practitioner or a paired CX architect team, as my Delta CX model suggests, is on the Agile or Scrum feature team, not as an outside consultant that you just talk to when you're not sure where to put a button. Putting us on the team breaks down silos. Make sure there are project and team charters so that everybody knows what each person is responsible for and where each role's boundaries are. Step 8, every CX worker must be held accountable for their work and they're part of a project. When a project experiences failure or customers are complaining, we have to look at where all of us failed. Shannon says, I'm sharing this with everyone. Dana Shri says, what's the difference between CX and usability analysts, as they both deal with human psychology and behavior? Hard for me to answer that because I can't tell from usability analyst what that person does day to day, because titles in our jobs are currently a little bit unstandardized. The side effects of holding CX workers accountable include removing or reassigning people who are unqualified or doing a poor job. Someone who's trying to fake it until they make it won't last long at your company if you are holding them accountable. You probably fire programmers who repeatedly write bad code, but few companies are firing a CX worker for doing CX work badly. It should be possible to lose your job by doing your job badly if you're getting the time, budget, and resources you would need to do your job well. If we're not getting the time, budget, headcount, or other resources to do a good job, this will come to light when we're held accountable, and someone will have to do something to improve that. We would probably stop holding those workshops that ask everybody to just have empathy and guess at how the product looks and works. Heads would roll when we didn't innovate in those workshops or when customers complain about the solution the workshop decided we'd build. Unqualified people would not want to guess at my work. That would be a beautiful side effect. Non-CX roles would not want to run the risk of interviewing customers badly or sketching screens at the building blocks level. If we held those people accountable for crappy screens, they might want to leave our work to us. Very often, I'm behind one. Very often, product managers and engineers and others want to make CX decisions or overrule ours. Hold them accountable for these decisions. If they make a decision that leads to customer dissatisfaction, poor ratings, more support tickets, customers leaving, etc., heads should roll. And if heads could possibly roll, I bet these roles wouldn't want to make decisions in our area of specialty. All of these, individually and together, would improve culture and collaboration. I've got about 5 more slides, so we'll run a little bit late today. A lot of people wonder, what is the ROI? How can CX possibly save time and money if we're adding people, tools, and resources to a project? Well, the first set of benefits are for portfolio, program, planning, product, and our budget. If we can better identify where we have low and high customer value products and features earlier, this improved prioritization should save us time and money. We need to say no to stakeholder ego projects, time wasters, and wild goose chases. The second set of benefits are for engineering. The time and money CX requires should be more than made up when engineering isn't guessing, trying to design things themselves, or drowning under change requests. Engineering's estimations will also be more accurate when they're working from CX blueprints. When engineering's time isn't split by trying to also do CX tasks, they should be more efficient and productive with higher velocity. Engineering saves time, money, and sanity after product release because if we employed a proper CX process, engineering should have little or no rework. We wouldn't have to find a flawed product's root causes and stop and fix them. We won't have to delay this project to fix or undo the previous project. Consider the entire arc of a software product. Without a proper CX process, there's a higher probability that our users are crash test dummies, finding product flaws we should have seen and fixed. Now customers have to burn service or support time to get help or report what's hard to use. Or we have to create or deliver more training to try to teach people to use something that's not as intuitive as it should be. Mistakes have costs associated with them. Mistakes the system made. Mistakes the system helped someone make. Mistakes the system didn't stop someone from making. You should see better morale on your tech teams. People don't enjoy releasing garbage to users. The flurry of circles on the screen are just some of the time and money that could have been saved by releasing a better product in the first place. While it can look like CX adds time and money to a project, when CX is done well, it has a huge ROI across the larger arc and life cycle of our products. Investing in CX helps you identify and reduce cycles of waste. Taking action. We have to drop faster, and work smarter. We must proactively recognize and mitigate risk. Better planning up front. Throw away surveys and guesses about who users are and what we imagine they need. Better qualitative research data helps us make better customer, product, and feature decisions. Better strategies, initiatives, and tactical approaches. There is nothing in agility or lean that says, don't spend extra time up front to do a better job the first time. Agile welcomes customer feedback-driven requirements and changing as we need to. Lean welcomes recognizing problems early, understanding their root causes, and eliminating waste and defects in both our internal processes and the user's experiences. Shift away from the fake versions of Agile and Lean that celebrate speed over quality, just shipping it, and publicly failing and having to fix it later. Stop believing your own press or employee handbook that says, we really deliver customer value, and we care about customers. All the mindsets and ceremonies on the planet won't matter if we're not delivering products that are easy to learn, easy to use, and matching customers' needs. People cutting corners to declare that a product or project is good enough to release to the public. People do cut corners to rush to declare a project is good enough to release to the public, but what is good enough in the eyes of our customer? Joe Rohde, recently retired senior vice president at Walt Disney Imagineering, said in 2018, one should not be asking the question, how little can we get away with, but rather, how much can we afford to do to be really impressive? This is the quote to hang on the wall, and it's how we start reinventing the customer experience. So with that, you can go to the second poll question if you'd like, which is, how do you plan to define quality and done? Maybe you plan to change nothing, and maybe you want to incorporate more customer centricity into your processes. You tell me. Now, of course, if you're watching this later, you'll have to go to this very weird URL, menti.com/V557QXYVMD. That'll take you to this poll, but I am happy to see those answers later on from anybody who happens to watch this later on. And with that, this one is finished. Oops, wrong slide. Where's me? There's me. Only 5 minutes late, hello. So if you have any last questions or comments, I'll stay for a few more minutes and take those questions and comments. Otherwise, that was improving agility by, what's it again? Improving agility by using customers' definitions of quality and done. I changed it a few times. I think that's what it is. And it's the talk that I'm giving to engineering, agile, and lean conferences and groups for 2021. I rewrite it every year and give it a new name. So a few years ago, it was DevOps ICU to match my book. Last year, it was Dev and UX, 2 ampersands, Dev and UX, a little engineering joke in there. And now it's improving agility by using customers' definitions of quality and done. And who knows what it'll be next year. So any last questions, comments, thoughts, disagreements? And I really do hope that you will share this out. Please, it's going to be archived on YouTube immediately. Please share it out. And please have a watch party at your company, especially for product managers, project managers, engineers, managers and leads, especially those who are in love with Agile and Lean and don't realize how much they're hurting customer satisfaction by over-focusing on speed. Solomon says all those Imagineering workshops, well-written imaginary requirements devoid of research won't mean squat if the UX is poop in the end. So true. Donna Shree says, any more book suggestions? The keeper of the book suggestions is Darren. Go to Google and type in Darren Hood book list, and you will find his Medium article with his list of suggested books. And that's what I suggest. I'm not keeping a list. I turn to Darren on that one. Any last questions? If there are no other questions, and again, I'm just waiting a few seconds since I know there's a 15-second delay or so for people watching live. So let's see, we could probably wrap it up. And yeah, we could wrap that up. So thanks everybody for joining in. Please do share this one out. I hope to see everybody tomorrow for office hours Ask Me Anything. And of course, please subscribe. I forgot to put that on the screen. Please subscribe here on the Delta CX YouTube channel. We're coming up on 2,000 subscribers. And of course, we'll be celebrating that with a ridiculous office hours where you can ask me any questions, but we'll have a special guest, Deb's boyfriend, who will also take questions as well. That is planned soon, early June, I think. So please do subscribe and tell everybody else too. It's free. Thanks, everybody. And I'm going to run. We're doing some user interviews tonight. And thank you to Kayleen for the 5 dogs out of 5. We'll put those guys up again. These are my real dogs, by the way. This is Romeo, Teseo, Pizzolo, Olivia, and Diana. So yes, this I hope my talk gets 5 dogs out of 5, but of course, if I can improve it, let me know, and I will happily rewrite it. Thanks, everybody, and I will see you soon.
Delta CX, available for CX and UX consulting, projects, and training. Contact us for a free consultation